24th of May 2023. I'm going to be your host tonight, Dana Durnford. I hope you're having a great night. On this Wednesday, here in Canada anyway, got lots and lots of stories to get through. We're seeing the nuclear industry is falling apart. They've been telling so many lies that they can't deny it anymore. We're going to jump right into it. By the way, you can call 709-589-4406. 4406. Hi, everybody. I got a extremely important poll for you tonight. Should we ban nuclear power plants, aka disease factories, to save the insects, the birds, the animals, the mammals, the whales, the bees, and humanity and all the species? And that's exactly what you should do. That's the only way to have a future. Is you can't have nuclear and species on this planet. And so they know what they're doing. They're not naive. So imagine 80 years of journalists stabbing you in the back. That's the first thing you got to understand when it comes to nuclear. 80 years of laughing at you, telling you lies, and then laughing at you. Yeah, hey, stupid, it's like a banana. Hey, morons, it's like walking in the sunshine. Have a nice day, dummies. That's how they see you, right? And they see themselves that way in one way, too, because they're willing to do something like that for a stupid paycheck. If they're smart enough to get that job, then they're smart enough to get a job where they don't have to destroy humanity and all the species for a paycheck. Censorship has gone nutty, isn't it, the last couple of days? Well, the last 3 weeks in particular, and the last year and a half, has been really bad, but the last 3 weeks has been just desperation. That's because the industry is dying. And you got 1,000 public relation firms that got nobody to attack. And we're going to jump right into it. The Pacific Ocean is not some dump for Korea or Japan, Korean activists. Protests. Now, so they bought into this fictional wastewater fable cooked up by the nuclear industry, and where they claim there's, on top of that the only thing coming, it's going to be released is tritium, but they've been hemorrhaging radiation into the environment non-stop. It's non-stop for 12 years. Excuse me. So for 12 years, this was done in the first 7 days. It was done by airborne radioactive fallout. It took 7 days. 7 days, you say? Yeah, 7 days of radioactive fallout to cover the whole planet. Now, it wasn't just by the oceans. And that's why it only took 7 days to wreck the Pacific. The whole planet was covered 19.5 days, 468 hours. Divided by 24 hours a day gives you 19.5 days of radioactive fallout covering the entire planet, not just the Pacific Ocean. It's been hemorrhaging long after, right? It continues to hemorrhage. The original pulse, this plume, these detonations, was a pivoting point in history for the biota and the species on this planet. This was an extinction event for the very, very, very vulnerable species. And so all the media shows you is the activists who are perpetrating the lie. That's what the media is sticking in your faces. Because they don't understand the big picture, but they know there is a picture. But they've been manipulated into thinking tritium. And so the media will put them on a pedestal to keep that deceit and dishonesty alive. And nuclear popularity grows in the U.S. amid doubts it can deliver. But that's simply not true. Popularity has not grown. It's declined dramatically. In fact, it's nosedived. And the story of small modular reactors has absolutely no teeth. They don't even have one built, let alone an actual design into the regulatory agencies. Into the regulatory agencies. So we got twice as many thumbs up, votes rather, as we do people on the video. My last two videos, I start off about South Korea, visiting Fukushima, and they have lost their minds because somebody is honest. They got no one to pick on. And so you got 1,000 people trying to kick the shit out of me every single day, all day long in the nuclear industry. And that's what they get paid for. They're really good at it. And it's not very hard. I have no big medias to support me. I don't have any big foundations to support or even talk about the subject. We don't have a single journalist on the planet that's acknowledging the facts. Facts are really straightforward. They're not that hard to learn. You don't need a degree to learn them. And so the lobbyists at Google got me down to 5 people on my show. Imagine that. On a show that I've been doing for over a decade, where all we do is this is a 24-hour news cycle. And they're vicious. They're absolutely vicious. And the voices in Congress that once opposed it are now silent on the issue. The nuclear industry has captured all your regulatory agencies, has captured all your universities, has captured your government agencies, has captured the key positions for the monetary in your government, has captured all the attention. And because it can't hold up the scrutiny, see? And so they have to capture everything for it to exist, and after 80 years, they have finally captured everything. And there's not a single one of them that, doesn't know what's going on, doesn't know this is evil on a whole different scale. Every nuclear power plant, except for a few, are surrounded by farms, for goodness sakes. So it's been going on for a very long time. And all we can do is shine this little lighthouse here of honesty and sincerity. And so the random policymakers and the investors that they're in the know, they need to know, and they're going to watch these types of videos because there's nobody else producing these types of videos. There is no competition. And so when they watch my video, that's going to switch them off nuclear right away. Because they've been fed the bananas and potato chips their whole life too, see? The climate support for nuclear is undoubtedly testament to the success of a decade-long promotional effort by the degenerate Department of Energy alongside a climate change advocacy group. Now, climate change is caused by 80 years of nuclear emissions that never goes away and is pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. gas, oil, and coal emissions don't pulse energy at the speed of light every second. This is not rocket science to understand what's really going on. In the political spectrum, industrial organization, in fact, after the nuclear war, you call nuclear testing they had for decades, that was nuclear war for decades. That particular radioactive fallout, if you got rid of all nuclear, period, right then, in, say, 1996, the planet will eventually go extinct because of the radioactive fallout never goes away and attacks everything with replicating cells. But because they dumped so much into the ocean, they blew so much up into the atmosphere, and when they say about underground testing, they cracked the earth open every single time and vented everything into the environment again, and that allowed the rain to also wash down and wash that stuff into the water tables. There was no way to win. They were aware of it. Industrial organizations, and they knew this would ultimately destroy everybody's future, and they acquiesced to it for a paycheck. So there's been a huge promotional effort by the Department of Energy and climate change advocacy groups on both sides of the political spectrum, because the nuclear industry's captured everything. Primary aim was, and still are, to prevent aging economic reactors from closing, which is what we've seen at the G5. We covered that last week or the week before. No, last week. And secure funding for small modular reactors and advanced reactors and associated fuel. There's no such thing as a small modular reactors. And it's like saying we're going to put, we're not going to build any more energy because fusion's coming somewhere in the future. Yeah, it could be 50 years, but it's coming. So we're not going to build any more gas, oil, coal, renewables, nothing, because fusion is coming. Yeah, it might be 50 years, 60 years, 70 years, 100 years, but it's coming, so we're going to wait. We're going to sign memorandums of understandings and wait for that. Exxon, now Constellation Energy, was driven by bottom-line concerns when it set up Nuclear Matters in 2014. Nuclear Matters, our old enemy Nuclear Matters. Schellenberg was one of those. They all started a common need, and Rod Adams was another one. They'll go down in history as real-life boogeymen. Sacrifice the planet and all the species so they can get a paycheck, sell their books and everything else. They sacrifice every species, every human, so they can have a couple of decades of wealth. Funding a message that would win over the public. Funding a scam. Bananas and potato chips and walking in the sunshine and getting on airplanes, climbing mountains, sleeping next to somebody. 80 years of the same lies, generation after generation, administration after administration. So difficult after the Fukushima disaster, which time it also had become obvious that a previous promotional campaign for a nuclear renaissance. Think about that statement, though, nuclear renaissance, which means, an uptick in construction and everything else. Because it's been gone for 50 years, but they haven't stopped for 50 years. They've been given billions and billions of dollars to promote it. Launched in the early 2000s, that previous promotional campaign effort resulted in plans for 28 reactors, for which construction operation applications were filled out, of which only 2, the Vogt plant in Georgia, were actually built. And they are absolute disasters. Holy shit. Westinghouse went bankrupt, Areva went bankrupt, and Paladin in Australia went bankrupt at the same time. As an alternative to these unwheeling behemoths, the Department of Energy, the lunatics that were captured by the nuclear industries decades ago, began pushing the concept of small modular reactors, particularly in 2013, 2 years after Fukushima's extinction level event lit up the entire planet forever. Based on conventional light water cooled reactors and later moved to an advanced reactor, climate change advocacy groups like Third Way and Degenerate Breakthrough Institute saw these data technologies as a means of reducing emissions. These think tanks, again, right, you got 8 billion on the planet, but the industry's think tanks is the only one with a voice. The other 8 billion don't matter. The 8 million species don't matter. Yeah, what a betrayal to breakthrough. We've covered it so many times. By focusing on smaller reactors, more akin to colas, like little beers rather than grizzly beers. What a disgusting way to articulate that. The Department of Energy advocacy groups hope to persuade the public that nuclear could be safer and cheaper and too cheap to meter than the monstrous large reactors of yesteryear, reducing or eliminating the possibility of Fukushima-style meltdowns. No, you're using mixed oxide fuel. You can't make a statement that it is not going to melt down when it doesn't even exist, and that you're using mixed, military-grade enriched mixed oxide fuel. Once you take that out of the containment and put it in a pool, by the way, it's hemorrhaging isotopes into the environment. The small modular reactors can be mass-produced in factories and transported to sites, and they all come with a mermaid and a unicorn. Similar to the production techniques advertised during the Renaissance that was a colossal failure at the Westinghouse, at Vogue, and a failed sinister sister project of VC Summer in South Carolina. Yes, they got an atrocious record. The nuclear history, just when it comes to building reactors, is absurd. They're literally bumbling idiots when you look at their legacy and their history. You wouldn't give them a job washing dishes if you had a restaurant, for instance, because they're such unstable elements of the human species. By 2017, there were successes preserving existing reactors, because that's what they're counting on now. They admit there's zero possibilities of a small modular reactor future. Zero. It's zero. It's actually zero. There's no supply networks. There's nobody building one. They got 50 different designs. There's no consensus. Well, they got 50 different designs and none of them into the regulatory agencies. It's just none of them with the ability to finish it out. Except for NuScale. NuScale got 18 years, still haven't finished it. Get it into the regulatory agency, you still got years and years and years to get through 1 million pieces of paper there. They're going to revise a lot of it. Then they're going to have to re-engineer it and resubmit it to the non-regulatory agencies. Then they're going to have to go through it to make sure that it's safe, and then they give them a license to build it. And again, you got to have a high-assay fuel that doesn't exist only from their terrorist buddies, Russia. Exxon has saved 2 reactors from closure, and this is the only thing they're hanging on to now. And whenever a reactor wants to close down, and should close down because they're embrittled from the neutron bombardment, the lobbying groups goes nutty, and the Congress and parliaments and diets around the world have no choice but to give them money because they're so deeply entrenched in our governments and our universities and our medias. The Department of, and Hollywood is disgusting how firmly entrenched they are in Hollywood. You know, the Hulk, the Spider-Man, Homer Simpsons is just not even a tip of the actual enormity of their infiltration. And everything is done by deceit and dishonesty and deception. They don't have anything to be proud of. They don't have a single person in the nuclear industry that the world can gravitate to. They don't have anybody with a personality whatsoever. The Department of Energy also succeeded in getting NuScale to lead a small modular reactor program. Getting NuScale to lead their small modular reactor program. This is the Department of Energy. And they still haven't got it designed into the regulatory agencies. They're still not trying to build one and get the kinks out of something 18 years later. And they're backed by the Department of Energy, who has literally an unlimited checkbook. They can write a check no matter how big it is if they want to get it done. They do it for everything else, they can do it for that. The reason not being done because doesn't exist. It's not going to exist. Meanwhile, Westinghouse, but they're so used to having a stranglehold on the regulatory agencies, the medias, the universities, they just won't let nothing else exist. I mean, geothermal curb stomps all small modular reactors ideology. Meanwhile, Westinghouse was forced to go bankrupt that year thanks to gross mismanagement. Well, you think it was just at that place that caused it? This was a decades of being stupid. It's guaranteed to happen. The latter of which collapsed amid, and there was criminal charges, prison sentences for officials involved in the Vogue. And in the case for Chicago, 4 defendants were found guilty. Another committed suicide this month of all charges related to bribery and other crimes. The householder, who conveniently has a get-out-of-free jail card. We don't have a narrative historian engineer, a nuclear engineer turned Silicon Valley venture capitalist. Ray Rothrock complained in 2018 at the Department of Energy's Nuclear Advisory Committee meeting. According to meeting notes, it's hard to come up with it, but it's doable. When it's a great story from an investor's point of view, the confidence goes up. But they're desperate, right? Why ain't you doing it with government investments if it's so rock solid? Why are you dependent upon private investors? Because that's what it is. It's a scam. It's a milk scam. Like fusion is. They got 50 years of milking the investors. 50 years. And they're no closer now than they were 50 years ago. And they're building on a design from 1904 because they don't have any natural talent on top of that. Right now we are selling Vogue and Summer. If we try to sell this idea of nuclear to somebody, it will be a hard sell. We need a new story. We need new propaganda. We need new deceit. We need new dishonesty. We need new disinformation. We need a new scam. That's what they're saying, right? Under the Trump administration, the new story was more of the same, namely nuclear was needed to accelerate decarbonization. And they admit all the time that this is just a scam. This is the promotional scam. It's simply doesn't work that way. You know, even if it did decarbonize the economy, 10% of the economy is not going to decarbonize the economy. It doesn't. It's the biggest polluter on the planet. It needs 2 gas, oil, and coal plants dedicated to build it, to run it for its whole life, and 60, 70, 80 years to decommission it. Like every facet of all the material in it is triple inspected. The carbon, and carbon, by the way, you can't have insects or birds or mammals or animals or bacteria or fungus or trees or bushes or humans without carbon. Carbon doesn't pulse energy every second. Radiation does. And it's released in invisible plumes that you can't see it or hear it or feel it or taste it or smell it or pick it up or throw rocks at it. And it covers the whole planet like a snowstorm, except you can't see it. And it never goes away. And this is happening every single day. Another invisible snowstorm ends up in the environment, pulsing energy every second for millions of years. It never goes away. You can't perceive it. But it wrecks the ecosystem. It wrecks the biota. That model is based on 20 days, up to 27 days when it finally stops, around 27 days. But at 20 days, the whole planet is covered in radioactive fallout. That's France's model. In 2021, the Department of Energy announced a total of $4.6 billion in cost share awards for its lead small modular reactor projects and 2 lead advanced reactor projects. And millions more for 4.6 billion, rather, millions more for other nuclear-related projects. To date, the spigot of money, mainly from taxpayers and ratepayers, have resulted in a gigawatt of commercial nuclear capacity, watts bar, which took 43 years to build it. So, to use it that there in that context, when it took 43 years to build it, that's so desperate, it's laughable. They were doing good. They were doing good after Fukushima. They had it all figured out. They didn't count on a couple of things. Me, Kevin Blanche, and a few other people would have a narrative that would scuttle their deceit and dishonesty and their betrayal, their deception, their sedition. We need more of this to the tune of 200 to 300 large reactors by 2050. They don't have the skill. They don't have the factories. They don't have the supply chains. And they're not just going to show up overnight. It's going to take decades to put that together. The trillions required to accomplish it would require nationalizing the U.S. electric grid. No, they're throwing at it now everything conceivable. And they can't get anything up and running. Their generation of generations of inbreeding, this current generation, is only good at being evil. It's not good at producing something. It's good at being scum. It's good at being evil, but it can't produce anything. It's good at being bullies, cowards, but it's not a muscle. It can't build stuff. Only France and South Korea is alleging they can do it. South Korea, of course, is at Fukushima. And so if they come out and say to South Korea, well, we don't trust them, well, how is South Korea going to have a nuclear renaissance? So they got no choice but to come out of Fukushima. The delegates, the so-called delegates, which is an absurd name to give these nuclear academics, and you know what they're all about, my goodness. They got they couldn't care less about people and the planet. They only care about their paychecks. So to build 200 or 300 large reactors in the United States is ridiculous to even suggest it. And so Stephanie Cookie is the former editor of the Nuclear Intelligence Weekly and author of quite a lot. And so she's been around. She knows the ins and outs. She's been embedded and entrenched with it, the industry, for a long time. And she's telling you it's simple. Nuclear has no shoes. It ain't going anywhere. Transforming Fukushima. Count down the crazies that give us a few ha-has each day. Transforming Fukushima into a region of recovery. Fukushima Prefecture releases video of Fukushima now, 12 years after the Great East Japan earthquake. Fukushima now. And so they put out a promotional video. I'm going to run you just through pictures I extracted from it. So we get a few hee-haws in here tonight. The Fukushima Prefecture government has released a new video. The Fukushima Prefecture government is the equivalent of saying the Italian mafia. Because that's what they are. They're the mafia in Japan, right? 12 years after the Great Eastern Japan earthquake, on its official YouTube channel. Nobody's censoring that channel. Nobody's censoring that channel. I got 15 people on my show, which is a miracle. I'm shocked I got that many people on the show. Honesty is not appreciated anymore, right? I'm sure I got more than that here, but it's censorship. Hi, everybody. Hope everybody's doing good. Dan and Asana's making dinner. This is what I'll be doing after. The video features charms and is now charms, which are cartoon characters, basically. And now in the prefecture, as well as Fukushima, vitality and proactive stance towards reconstruction. Like, so why frame it that way? That's not the typical way you would frame a recovery from a typhoon or a hurricane or a cyclone or some catastrophic event, a volcano or whatever, right? No, they know they're evil, and they know they're evil. They're not stupid. Futaba town in August, where the entire town was evacuated for 12 years. And so, you know, you go to my playlist, you'll see the radioactive fallout, the whole country. Let me explain that a bit better before we jump into all these pictures. Radiation levels spiked on the U.S. West Coast. This was France, the French government, the IRSN, the nuclear experts from France. This is their model showing 1 million to 10 million times cesium-137 covering the entire northern hemisphere. And that model is only the 18th. That's 7 days after the tsunami. Do you really think it stopped? It didn't stop, because we can show you other models at 19 days. But right, seems that's France. Here's another model from France, and I'm going to stop it on 7 days. That's 7 days. That's 20 days, 19 days. That's 20 days right there, radioactive fallout. That's France's model. Here's another France's model showing 10 million becquerels, up to 10 million times per cubic meter of air of cesium-137. Like, that plume is never going away. It'll be long gone before that's just that particular. And there's so many different isotope plume models we got from so many different countries. To ignore that is it's unconscionable, isn't it? It's untenable. So now the yellow spots is where they're trying to move people in this year. The purple is the no-go zone. The red spots, dots, are where they moved people in last year. And so they can drive into this little section, but they can't play in the garden, they can't cross the street, they can't go for a walk or something like that. And when they leave, they got to drive right out of that whole section, because that's a no-go section for 12 years. So the industry is so lunatic, it's so vicious, it's actually moving people into the zone that they consider insane. This is screen captures from the official Fukushima prefectural government's video released to promote it. The air dose rates in most parts of the prefecture is the same as major cities or less than around the world, is what they're claiming. You see Akuma right there? Akuma is, you can see the nuclear meltdowns from Akuma. It's 2 kilometers away. And they're claiming 0.09. There's 14 million one-ton bags of radiation stored there. It's been abandoned. To suggest that is 0.09, there really should, there should be accountability. there is for everything else, but there's not for nuclear. And so they're insane. There's no incentive not to be a scumbag. There's no incentive not to lie. And there's a big incentive to lie. Well, it's impossible to not lie. They can't tell you the truth because it'll conflict with 80 years of propaganda. My apologies. I'm thirsty. Well, and so they got these little sections in Okuma opened. And anybody goes there, you got to drive through a nuclear wasteland to get there. When you get there, you're surrounded by a nuclear wasteland, and the air is incredibly radioactive because it's airborne. So they're trying to overwhelm you with propaganda, show you pretty-looking candles, and claim steps are being taken to accelerate reconstruction. Wow. By candles everywhere. That's steps. So it's meant to dress it. And this bizarre creature, Ichibori, he's currently the governor of the Fukushima Prefecture for quite a few years. Before that, he was a degenerate pro-nuclear. And he's been relentlessly evil. We've covered him now for 12 years. He's relentlessly evil. That's the only way you can describe this. Instead of having geothermal, they've got solar parks. Why not build geothermal, which is perfect? Well, because it competes with nuclear, Dana. So therefore, the whole planet should get sick and die. Fukushima Hydrogen Energy Research Field in the nuclear, this is in NAMI, which 97% of it is still a no-go zone. So they're putting that there, like the whole every facet of the story is, you couldn't imagine it 13 years ago. The industry was actually this evil. They'd taken it to a whole different level. So this is NAMI, and NAMI is an abandoned community, 7 kilometers away from ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns. And claiming that's the revitalization, and the Japanese taxpayers are actually paying for all of that. All of these little businesses that moved into the nuclear wasteland, they're not there of their own free will, basically. They're there because they were thrown a lot of money, a lot of incentive. But you don't revitalize an area by doing something like that. That's desperation on a whole different level. That's failure is what you're talking about. Fukushima Innovative Coast Framework is a government project. Restore the industries, and that were struck by the earthquake and nuclear accident. You can't restore after nuclear accident. That's the problem with nuclear accident. So they're talking about robots and drones, energy, environment, recycling in a nuclear wasteland of all places, agricultural, forestry, and fisheries in a nuclear wasteland, for goodness sakes, healthcare in a nuclear wasteland. So they're clutching at straws every step of the way. That's not revitalization. That's like you're right. That's pure manipulation. You're not actually. There's no sincerity in what they're doing. And we've seen so many examples of this for decades. It's stupid. It's a stupid waste of money. You see the big arm holding on to something? All those electronics will fry if you put it next to nuclear. And robot surgeries, they got a bunch of students in a few miles away from the nuclear wasteland playing with the instruments, and somehow that makes nuclear meltdowns all better. It's disappointing, not surprising, but disappointing that was the best they can come up with. They have no hope, right? There's zero hope that this is going to be revitalization, any of this. It's probably one of the worst, most poorly thought out public relations stunts I've seen. I've seen a lot over the years, but this is the most desperate I've ever seen. Oh, peaches are a main agricultural product of Fukushima, which is true, but the biggest one is rice. Over 1 billion pounds a year in a nuclear wasteland, surrounded by nuclear wastelands. They never stopped growing any of it. And they poisoned probably 1 billion people since then, directly through food, through exports. Particularly in Canada. Everybody in Canada was poisoned. Canada removed all restrictions on the food after 93 days. 55 countries banned it for a decade. And those countries then, when people in key positions were replaced by pro-nuclear and lifted the restrictions. And 40 of them. Canada just removed it voluntarily because Japan couldn't ship the food anywhere. Everybody had a ban except for Canada, so they shipped it all to Canada, all the radioactive food from the nuclear wasteland. Now everybody in Canada is sick. Increases in exports of peaches and vegetables and rice. 2014, it was starting to go up. And now it's records. Now it's breaking records, pre-Fukushima records. And it's all radioactive. Oh, they're checking it, they said. Efforts are made to ensure food safety. They refuse to acknowledge any radioactive food from the nuclear wasteland that is surrounded. I'll show it to you, maybe. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. Now come on, Danny, you always can. Okay. So Fukushima's in the center. The food was banned by all 14 of those prefectures in 55 countries because they were radioactive. They're harvesting food alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation. How much more eviler do you actually got to get? I've never seen nothing like it. We don't got anything else out there compared to it. Pre-Fukushima, the thought that people would harvest food alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation have never crossed anybody's mind on the entire planet. Now it's normal. This picture here was from the mainstream media chastising the readers for talking about Fukushima radiation. And the picture had farmers alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation and thousands of them, surrounded by millions of them. Efforts are being made to ensure food safety through continued monitoring efforts and monitoring. Like, it doesn't work this way. There's no honesty in Japan's monitoring, period. There's nothing there. I haven't got a single example in 12 years to show anybody. Not one example. It doesn't get much worse than that, does it? Progress of reconstruction work. 99% complete, except for, being in a nuclear wasteland. Again, be very cautious about believing anything Japan tells you or the nuclear industry. It's best to assume they're lying to you, because 99.98% of it will be lies. And they do it all day. Every journalist we cover every single day is telling you lies. And it's organized. It's 100% organized. Most journalists are not writing the actual articles. They're written by the lobbying groups, sends it to the media. The media publishes with a journalist's name on it, and that's how they make their money. Because the nuances are not, you're not going to just go read Wikipedia and figure out these unbelievable, blatant deceptions. You have to be pretty in the know for a very long period of time to be able to write these types of articles we're talking about. We cover them. We can't cover everything, so we cover the most atrocious 5 days a week. And it takes 2 hours just to get through a 24-hour cycle of just cherry pick stories. If you try to cover everything, you're looking at 4, 5, 6 hours a day. It'd be just as well to sit here all day long and go through the news cycle and do it in real time than it is to do all the preparatory work. And the preparatory work that I do, it's absurd, really. And what do I get? I get 15 people on my show or something tonight. I've never seen that low of a number before. And this subject is not your typical subject. So the people that watches this subject, they're hardcore. They're not just going to randomly disappear, as those numbers are suggesting, right? So they're still there. They're just not registering. And then the industry, they use these children constantly. I think it's so absurd that they do that. It's a whole different level of evil when you do stuff like that. It really is. It's a whole different level of contempt when you stoop to that kind of level. Well, it's desperation, really, isn't it? I mean, what else could it possibly be? Oh, the sake. The sake brands were awarded gold prizes, #1 in Japan, for nine consecutive years. The nuclear wasteland sake was the best sake in all of Japan, in the nuclear wasteland, for 9 years in a row. There's some serious quality control there. There is none, nothing. That's some control for the nuclear industry, but there's no quality control, obviously. It's ridiculous to suggest that the nuclear wasteland is the best sake each year. So they control everything. But they don't have any skills. They can't build reactors. All they can do is lie. They're inbreeds of inbreeds of inbreeds for telling lies, but they're not doers. They don't have conviction. Right? Again, they don't have a single person in the nuclear industry that the world says, hey, that person's pretty cool. Everybody agrees that, they don't have a spokesperson. And who do they roll out? So they hang on the sleeves of Bill Gates and Elon Musk. That's their poster child that they're using for nuclear industry, because nuclear industry doesn't have a poster child. Because the world will say, well, that's a piece of shit. Every time they put a poster child like Michael Schellenberg and Rod Adams, when they put these people on a pedestal, the world rejects them immediately. It's very obvious these are scumbags. So the nuclear industry can't use one of their own because they come across as scum. Now, I'm being polite, but I'm being honest. And that's why they don't use anybody from the nuclear industry. The ones they try to use, like Schellenberg, like if you go out and you see stories from Michael Schellenberg where he's doing popular conventions where the industry shows up and uses him or Rod Adams, or you see them guys giving speeches and posting it on media, the comment section will eat them. The comment sections ridicule them. Because it's 80 years of telling the same lies. When do we break free of that? When does the rest of the planet matter? When does humanity matter? Because you're running out of time, folks. This is not a game. That's 9 years, the Fukushima sake won the Golden Award of the whole country in the nuclear wasteland. And they're selling it worldwide. They're shipping it worldwide. That doesn't mean that this is tenable or sustainable. But this is the desperation, what you're seeing, right? There's a bunch of bank robbers, and one gets arrested and rats out the rest. That's what's coming down the pipe for the nuclear industry. It's only a matter of time. Same thing with the strawberries. There's a special strawberry. Allegedly doesn't suck up so much cesium, but the biggest byproduct of reactors is curium, uranium, plutonium, and everything else. But they got 80 years of telling you cesium. Cesium's real, don't get me wrong, it's nasty on top of that. But it's 80 years of the same lie. They don't have, we're not the dumb hicks we were 80 years ago, right? And they know it. And they can't keep telling the lie for 80 years without it becoming unconvincing. So they know what the lie is. They get an education to go out and tell that lie to manipulate you, but they don't have conviction when they tell the lie. And that comes across. And particularly young people will spot it right away, see? Which is their biggest fear. That disgusting, despicable parasite, Uchibori, well, we covered him at least 1,000 times in the last decade. I've never seen him a single time where he was almost has some human attributes. Not a single time. The Fukushima rice bran was a special Fukushima rice bran meant to only... the story was that it rejects cesium. And radiation doesn't get rejected by anything. Radiation is the boss. And it's a total deceit, and it's total deception, it's totally dishonest, and they're talking about £1 billion a year and exporting it worldwide. What does Fukibori mean? I can't remember. Puffer fish, which don't belong in Japan, by the way. They're there because they wrecked the Pacific Ocean. Number of countries and regions with import restrictions on food from Fukushima after the action was 55, in 2022 was 12. But just because people remove restrictions don't mean it was done honestly. And Japan was the breadbasket for China and Asia, right? And they still have the restrictions. Taiwan, South Korea, China all still have restrictions. But they have convinced 40 countries by putting people in key positions to remove the restrictions with the shake of a hand, right? Like Boris Johnson last year, like Biden last year, or 2021 rather, for them. And in Canada, Stephen Harper moved restrictions after 93 days, while 55 countries kept the ban for over a decade. And radiation doesn't go away in a decade at all. Not even a little bit. For all intents and purposes, it never goes away when you compare it to the human experience and the species experience. They won't outlast the man-made genocide and omnicide. And it's despicable to suggest because countries, without consent, without referendums, removed restrictions. Because when they had referendums, like in Taiwan in 2018, they kept the embargoes against the products. That's why they don't have referendums anymore. So they put out this video to manipulate anybody foolish enough to watch it, but there's nothing sincere about it. It doesn't have that aura. It doesn't have that, it doesn't have that cool factor. It doesn't have, and money can't buy it. Only honesty can buy that stuff. Number 11. So they had 12 points, 12 years. First time in 11 years that a train pulled into this nuclear wasteland, which is still a nuclear wasteland. But does that mean that everything is better? Does that, what they showed you, does that prove that nuclear is now, that lasts for millions of years, is magically gone in 12? The hope tourism. Hope tourism. There's no honesty. There's no sincerity. There's nothing endearing about them. It's all show and tell. And it's not even a show and tell. And they brag about manipulating children, tricking children and families to coming back to the nuclear wasteland is unimaginable. Like, disconnect. The people that created the video are truly people you would never want to have for a next door neighbor or a loved one or a family member. They're really not. They're not naive, they're not gullible, they're just evil. The Great Japanese Earthquake and Nuclear Disaster Memorial Museum opened in 2020. That was $50 million. They're 2 kilometers away from ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns. They spent $50 million on it. They have, this is quite interesting actually. Let me see if I can find it. Bear with me. All 13 of you. I'm not here every night because I'm bored or I don't have something that I would rather do. That I would love to have a life, but I've sacrificed my life to make sure the story gets told as often as I can do it. And I'm not even healthy. People don't understand how unhealthy I actually am, how difficult it is for somebody with no health to gut up, do this constantly. Bear with me. Hang on there a second. I'll show you something that really tells the story of that museum I was just showing you. If I'm fortunate enough that I can find it. It's not something I bring up that often anymore. We're almost there. I can feel it in my bones. But maybe it's not to be. It looks like we're way past it. Oh. Just when I say no, that's when we get a yay. That's not it. That's it. Okay. Try that again. Okay. This time. That museum has around 160,000 things from the prefecture. And a lot of it's just stupid, mundane stuff, right? In order to remember the earthquake, the tsunami, the nuclear accident, right? That's pretty impressive. $50 million. But the records, the 42 counties tossed out the records from the 2011 quake because they didn't have room to store it. They threw it all away in 2019, the year before the museum was finished. The museum wouldn't take it. The records of all the sacrifices, all the heroes, and all the victims. Because dead man tells no tale, right? The list of names of the volunteer workers. The village, we don't have space to preserve all the documents in a ghost town, in a nuclear wasteland. They could have just left it there. Nobody's going to bother it. But they had room for 160,000 other items that got nothing to do, that don't show you this absurd amount of documentation. You got any idea what kind of scumbag it takes to throw that away? The importance of that is absurd. I would be incredibly proud to have access to something like that. The $50 million museum, a few miles away from multiple ongoing nuclear meltdowns, didn't have room for it, but had room for 160,000 other things, but not for the actual documentation. Over 150,000 people got tricked into going within a couple of kilometers of ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns. And I'm not kidding you, they got tricked. No, everything's safe, Ichibori would tell them. Look at us, we're stupid as the rocks. The sun rises and falls everywhere. You don't have to go to a nuclear wasteland to see it, okay? You know why? Because it's a nuclear wasteland. The new Finnish nuclear power station has bad time reducing production after months of work due to low electricity prices. So because of renewables, you remember Finland has been trying, they're years and years and years behind schedule. They're billions and billions and billions over budget. And in that time, renewable came online all over the places there. And they don't actually need the nuclear no more now that they got it. We talk about this over the years lots. Where nuclear is so late to the party, by the time they, even if you do get it together, renewables will have them curb stomped. And we're seeing a lot of that. This is a new plant they just brought online. That is, what is it, $10 billion over budget? 14 years behind schedule? And renewables are so cheap that nobody wants the nuclear. The increased stake in renewable energies. Such a great story, isn't it? The Chinese electric vehicle manufacturer invested in nuclear fusion startup. How many fusion companies are there? They all got their own design. Nobody can agree on anything. Everybody's top secret. How are you going to crack fusion when everybody's top secret? They're not trying to crack it. They're just trying to loot the system, manipulate the investors and everybody else, and get countries and communities and everything else or whatever to sign stupid memorandums of understanding. That only means you're going to throw money at this sinking ship. Well, here's a whole bunch of money. Well, the boat's sinking though. That's okay. Here's a whole bunch of money, but the boat's sinking. You understand that, right? Yeah. Here's a whole bunch of money. Don't worry about it. But the boat's sinking. That's what nuclear actually is. See? Heat wave and hot winds continue to wreak havoc in Delhi. Water pot campaign for animals and birds has started. That was supposed to be in my other section. So they're putting out 500, what they call water pots, because the animals can't survive without it. And Fukushima has caused this pulse climate change since 2011 this was a pulse. And that was the straw that broke the planet's back of 80 years of radioactive fallout. But I got to put that story in my proper folder tonight after the show, so I cover it for die-off videos. Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant switches to diesel generators. I don't know what's going on there currently tonight or today. Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant switches diesel generators after high voltage line shuts down. This is the seventh time they lost external power. Plants run on external power. They can't run on their own energy. That's another thing. The small modular reactors are going to need, if they ever create them, they won't be small. Like Rolls-Royce is going to be half the size of the big reactors. And they're calling it small reactors. They get a tax break or something. But I mean, it's absurd. People are saying, well, they need to use small modular reactors on certain satellites that go into space. Yeah, but the biggest one they've ever sent out there was like 500 watts, like 5 light bulbs worth of energy. They don't qualify, right, as a small modular reactor. You know, they got 80 years of it. How come they haven't built one? You think if they could, they wouldn't have? You know why they have big ones? Because they couldn't build small ones, right? They used to say it was economy of scale, but we know now that's not true. The auxiliary power is supplied, and that's only supposed to be for 6 or 8 hours, from diesel generators. The radiation levels remain within the normal range. Whenever you hear stories of something breaking at a nuclear plant, you'll always see a line, a sentence like that. Exactly like that, by the way. No matter where it happens to on the planet, you'll see that exact same sentence. China to start building lunar base on the moon soil in 5 years, give or take a couple of hundred. How come you haven't done one in the last 50 years, China? You bullshitter. Just like, how many times, how many years now, all these years they've been doing it, 5 decades they say stuff like this and they still haven't built one. When is enough going to be enough, I wonder? Oh, they're going to send 4 astronauts. They're going to circle the moon. No, they're going to land on the moon, Dana. They done it 50 years ago, Dana. The computer power they got today blows everything away. In fact, the computer power in your Apple Watches are 100 times more powerful than the computers that took up a city block 50 years ago. And so they can't figure out how to land on the moon. This is the second trip they're talking about. And this won't be for another year. And NASA's legacy is just absurdly ridiculous, isn't it? Releases the identity of 4 astronauts that will circle the moon. When I seen that, I blew up laughing. Going to circle the moon and come back home. What's the point of it? I don't understand this at all. They sent a small sat box or something, like a little satellite about the size of a shoebox, built by students, and it spent a month trying to get it in orbit around the moon. They couldn't do it, so they're going to send it to the sun. They can do that, but they can't put it in orbit around the moon. It took over a month later. We're 50 years down the road, and they can put robots on Mars, but they can't put a robot on the moon. How come there's no robot on the moon? To get the kinks out before they send it to Mars. Like, you really got to ask yourself that question: what the hell is going on? And from what I've seen of astronauts, the people that get these jobs, they got a pretty seeded history. They got their whole life is bizarre. They're the inbreeds, too, of generations of inbreeds. You can't be an astronaut unless you're 100% inbreed of the inbreeds. They're actually worthless humans. Ukraine war is impacting the global nuclear energy market. But the only good thing about the war, I guess, isn't it? And a small modular reactor scaled down version of AP1000 reactor. So it's not even a small modular reactor, it's just a scaled down version of a common reactor, with a goal for the first one to deliver power to the grid within a decade. That we've been hearing that version for decades. They don't even have a license in. Westinghouse, which sold out most of their legacy to Brookfield, went bankrupt at the Summers and Volt plants. NuScale, Oregon, and the Oregon, Washington nuclear industry, these are fucking scumbags, man. Excuse the language, but They've harassed me a lot on the telephone and emails over the years. They're scumbags. I have a real problem with these people. They made me part of what I am like today because of these people, the torture they done to me. They're one of the reasons why I'm never going to give it up. I'll never stop doing what I'm doing. And NuScale and the rest of them are some of the very foundations of why. Because that's the worst thing you can do to me is to censor me and to attack me like they done. That's the worst thing you can do because I'm never going to go away. I'll never go away. I'll be dying in the hospital bed and I'll still get one more video out. Sure, you choked the bastard's life out of them. Don't let the scumbags have a future. They will build the first U.S. small modular reactor with government support. No, it's not with government support. It's for the governments, for the Department of Energy. 18 years later, they got nothing. And they're the prima donna. They got nothing. The rise of the small modular reactor disease factories have been hailed by policymakers as a potential game changer, which is nonsense. This is just a public relation firm sat there cooking up. This is not written by the people in the media. This is written by lobbyists, and the media gets it in an email. A journalist there puts their name on it, and they get a big kickback, and the journalist gets a chunk of it. But you got to really be in the know to know these nuances, these minutiae, these details, let alone be evaluated for commercial viability in industry prone to cost overrun. Cost overrun. For NuScale's first disease factory, inflationary pressures led to a 50% increase in estimates. Inflationary pressures. No, like when they first announced, right, they were going to build 10 small modular reactors at Idaho National Laboratories. It was obvious that the numbers they were using, it was impossible to build something. And it was going to double, triple, quadruple shortly after, and that's exactly what ended up happening. And then everybody will pull out because they got their foot in the door by lying. This is what they've always done. The entire legacy of the industry is predicated upon deceit and dishonesty and deception. It is unlikely that significant commercial constructions of disease factories will take place before the end of the century. That was pretty fun. Let me read that again. Well, I like that. I almost feel like I need a cigar, and I don't even smoke. It is unlikely that significant commercial construction of small modular reactors, also known as disease factories, will take place before the end of the century. Oh, baby, that gotta hurt. I gotta put that in my pile so I can find it later. That's diamond. Yeah. Poor nuclear. Nuclear just got outed. It'll be at least nowhere in the next 80 years. It is unlikely that significant commercial construction of disease factories, aka small modular reactors, will take place before the end of this century, despite NuScale's ambition. NuScale don't got no ambition. They're throwing money at them. They don't got to do jack shit on it, pretend. Right? Yes, no, maybe? You know I'm right. For the nuclear industry to remain successful is imperative that safety, security, non-proliferation, climate change be observed collectively. Well, nuclear is climate change. Environmental agency condemns for suggesting Hinkley C could drop fish deterrent measures. So, there are some so-called mitigation for nuclear power plants to stop fish from being killed. So there's around 17 million adult fish each year in Indian Point were killed, and around 9 million in New Jersey each year are killed in the water intakes. That's adult fish. There's trillions of baby fish killed each year in exchangers. There's billions of baby fish each year killed in the filtration at each plant. The reactors are boiling 1 million gallons a minute. Each glass is 1 billion creatures, eggs and larvae and phytoplankton, around 75 to 100 million phytoplankton per glass of water is boiled away. So the 16 million billion creatures each minute boil away in a reactor, and there's over 400 of them worldwide. These are just evil. That's what nuclear is. It's only good at being evil. It has no other qualities. It excels at being evil. Let's do this the other way then. Hang on. Where did I put that one to? Like, the list is so weird when you look at when you start looking at nuclear. It never the madness. There's no end to the madness. Usually got Indian Point there somewhere. Usually I got. Let me do one more try. Yeah, I haven't got a label. I screwed up. It's there. Normally I can find it, but I haven't looked lately, so now I can't find it. I don't see it. Okay, let's keep moving this boat. But sometimes I'll keep stuff in folders with a bunch of other stuff, and then if I lose track at a big picture, I'll never find it. And I hate it when I can't find what I need, right? So I'll relabel that tomorrow and have that. I'll fix that. Hinkley Point. It's the biggest construction site on the entire planet. It's going to use enough cement to build a sidewalk to Rome. There was 100 cranes there at one point. It's hard to comprehend how big the site actually is, how much material. It's going to be around 40 billion US, but if they, like currently, by the time they finish it, it'll probably be 50 billion. It got all the precious metals on the planet, and it's surrounded by farms. You see in the background in the very top? It's all farms. The big polluter, one massive container ship equals 50. Now, lots of these power plants get canceled, right? That might be the case there because it's going to take them forever. And all the other proper energy sources are going to curb stomp it, right? One massive container ship equals 50 million cars. So one of these container ships puts out the same amount of pollution as 50 million cars, and 15 of them produces more pollution than all the cars, the 760 million cars worldwide. And remember, carbon ideology was created in a public relation campaign by BP Oil. And so maybe I can find it over here. I don't think I have it over here, but just give me 1 second. I might be able to jack it, because sometimes I import bookmarks, but it don't look like the case. I didn't either, look at that. Yeah, it'll teach me. Next time, I'll import bookmarks tomorrow so I don't get caught out anymore. Here we go. How's the poll going tonight? Should we ban nuclear power plants, aka disease factories, to save the insects, the birds, the animals, the whales, and humanity? Well, yeah, of course we should. Of course we should. So we got a new jacket. Nuclear power plants are disease factories over at my site. You'll find links in the bottom of the description to this site. I love nuclear, 93 million miles away. One of my favorite ones. Save the children, ban nuclear power plants. Pro-nuclear is a hate crime, hoodies. Nuclear power plants are disease factories. And we have pictures on the front and the back. Very important. When you see these little stories, they're really important stories. Save the insects, ban nuclear power plants. Save the whales, ban nuclear power plant. And sometimes when you open them up, you'll find other what they would put in that same pile, right? And then at the bottom you find more. That's over at my website, nuclearproctologist.org. Has links also. There's links on my main page. The shop doesn't show up on my YouTube. So you're not seeing these shirts advertised, right? I'm blocked. I'm actually blocked. Let me show that to you actually for a bit of fun. Show you how that works. So here's the video you're watching, right? We'll click that, we'll scroll down, and you see products. So this is inside. So I have 10 selected products. You see that? They should be showing up, right? All those shirts. So I can drag shirts over there and drop them in. It probably won't do it because we're live, right? But it did, so I can probably save that. But that's not showing up. And if you go to my front page, you don't see shop. If you go to About and click on that, and scroll down, you'll get a link to my shop, to Nuclear Merchandise Shop. That'll take you over to my shop, right? But normally, it would show up, right? Because like I have it, everything is tagged, but it's not showing up under my video. It's not showing up on my front page. There's no links in where it should be. So they cut me out, right? I got 18 people watching the show, allegedly. Allegedly, magically, everybody doesn't want to watch nuclear all of a sudden. No, that's desperation. That's all that is. And Hinkley Point, they claim is going to kill 10 billion fish a year. The numbers are absurd. It's absurd, the numbers we're actually talking about. To suggest it's only 10 billion is, they're definitely missing the big picture. Contextualizing TAE's new fusion breakthrough. No, we covered that. Again, this is another fable. This was Idaho National Laboratory, I think it is, right? And this wasn't a fusion breakthrough. This was a military-industrial complex breakthrough. But again, you're talking about, it's not really a breakthrough. This is only meant to bring in investors, right? And people who don't know any better and thinking that they're going to be on the cutting edge when it's the opposite. And it's a scam. It's a Ponzi scam. That's what fusion is. There is no fusion. Spin it in a vacuum chamber and hit with beams of boron nuclides and hydrogen plasmas, heat it up to 300 million degree Fahrenheit temperatures, and the list goes on and on. They got 190 lasers, and the pulses of energy are equal to 1,000 times what the America produces each in energy. You know, and the two breakthroughs over the last couple of years went like this. They came out with one story that they produced excess energy. So all of a sudden, it was a couple of days later, the news was going crazy, and they re-interviewed the people, and they said, yeah, it was equal to 6 kettles of water worth of energy boiled, excess energy. I'm sorry, it was equal, the first one 2 years ago was equal to a 9-volt battery. Now wait a second, you're putting enough energy in, which is 1,000 times the grid for a millionth of a second or something. But you're talking about temperatures of 300 million degree Fahrenheit temperatures. So how much water can you boil at 300 million degree Fahrenheit temperatures is the first question. And how did you extrapolate that you had an extra energy of a 9-volt battery? Okay, so we ridiculed them that whole year. So the next year, fusion came out with another breakthrough, was they produced enough extra energy to boil 6 1-liter jugs, kettles of water. And again, how many kettles of water do you boil? And that you were able to extrapolate, you had 6 extra ones. It's a total fantasy. It's a ludicrous fantasy. It's scary that they would say something like that. It's confusing that they would say those types of, that's their proof. Well, we produced enough energy, it was equal to a 9-volt battery. You sure that wasn't static electricity? At 300 million degree Fahrenheit temperatures, it's probably possible, isn't it? No, they're bizarro. They're weirdos. That's the only way to describe that industry. There's a bunch of weirdos, introverts, extravagant weirdos. Australia is such a disappointing. The media in Australia is so disappointing. They hate Australians and all the insects and animals and birds and everything else. The fight of our life, new nuclear pushes, wind farms, worries grow. Like Australia is perfect for geothermal. It's better than perfect, probably one of the better spots. The anti-nuclear lobby is losing power. That was a weird one because the Australians are usually pro-nuclear. When activist movements start veering off on moral tangents, it's a sign they've given up arguing with the facts. I got no idea because the story's blocked. Protest is not a crime. Trashing the planet is a crime. So they got all these students that are, and they love this, right? That's their bread and butter. They manipulate certain groups of people, particularly young people, into thinking that carbon is the issue and that nuclear is the solution when nuclear is the issue and nuclear is the problem. 80 years of it, and it never goes away. Extremely difficult for nuclear energy to ever have a future in Australia. There's an honest voice. First off, it's illegal to build reactors in Australia, don't you know? I think for nuclear, as much as it's said as a fantastic opportunity, it's generally going to be extremely difficult for it to ever have a future in Australia. But the pro-nuclear in Australia, the only ones worse than them is the British. Well, Canada is always at the top, I suppose, but Dennis Britain and Dennis Australia. The pro-nuclear Australia, they should get DNA samples of all of these people because they're committing crimes. Here's an interesting one. U.S. must take control of Pakistan's nukes. It's like the U.S. could be trusted. The government, the nuclear industry in the U.S. is vicious. U.S. must take control of Pakistan's nuke. How's that going to work? How many drone strikes have the Americans got in Pakistan now, I wonder? 100,000, 200,000 to get 100 Taliban? They're really good at blowing up wedding parties and killing everybody, but they can't seem to hit the Pakistan or the Taliban, the remnants of Taliban. They kill more unicorns and Sasquatches than they do Talibans, right? Which are probably, at least they're real compared to the Taliban. Taliban is just, it's the justification. They were created by the industry in the first place to have a boogeyman, just like North Korea. Well, North Korea is quite different, I suppose, but they're the boogeyman, right? 80 years of the boogeyman. In a nation where the army is believed to be supreme in Pakistan. No, it is. Remember, they were striking, the people were striking there a few months back, were saying, we can't eat nuclear weapons. Start spending money on the country. Stop spending it on nuclear. Because nuclear industry, if allowed, it'll destroy the country. And that's what we see in Pakistan and Canada and the United States and many other countries that are pro-nuclear. The industry has, and generations of inbreeding have guaranteed the country to fail every which way. No matter what it tries, it'll fail because nuclear is there to stick their feet in front of you and trip you up. So Americans should go down and take control of Pakistan's nukes. Yeah, that's going to go over really good. The world's first nuclear weapons was tested by the USA on July the 16th, 1945. And those people are not, that live around there, are not entitled to compensation, but everybody else in the surrounding states are. There's a wildfire burning near Hanford. It burned 1,000 acres, and then he said it went out, or they got it out. First off, Hanford is the very last people on the planet you want to believe. There really isn't anybody honest at Hanford. Hanford dumped 450 billion gallons directly into the soil of high-level nuclear liquid waste in the 50s and 60s. So did Idaho National Laboratories and the rest of them. But just talk about Hanford. Hanford, that's just one of the many things they've done at this site. So 450 billion gallons is equal to 1.4 million of those large tanks they got there right now, dumped into the soil. They got 177 tanks there they're going to spend 30, 40, 50 billion on, or already have, I should say. And they're going to spend the equivalent or more later. But they actually dumped 1.4 million of those tanks already into the soil. 450 billion gallons is also equal to an aquarium 6 feet wide and 518 feet tall, full of nuclear waste, high-level nuclear waste wrapped around the planet. And you're talking about at least thousands of sieverts, no matter where you approach that wall, you're going to be getting doses of. So if you drive past it at 100 miles an hour, you're still going to die that week. From the gamma shines, the X-rays, neutron bombardments, the beta rays. So anyway, they claimed there was 1,000 acres burnt up from a lightning strike. But summer's not even here yet, right? Wait till it heats up there, because they have huge droughts there and dust storms, so liberating a lot of the radiation into the environment that way. Hanford's one great big stupid disease factory too, right? During the first years, Hanford nuclear production dumped 450 billion gallons of radioactive liquid into the soil. There's currently 177 tanks with 56 million gallons of lethal nuclear sludge at Hanford. They spent 30 billion or more on plans to seal that in glass, so dumping 450 billion gallons is equal to 1.4 million of those tanks. You get how unbelievably corrupt and just stupid, really. They spoil the planet for everybody. That's all they succeeded in doing, is destroying the planets and everybody's future. ASIO agents are embedded in Defense protect Australia's secrets for the submarines. Probably one of the more stupider stories I heard. That could be one of the reasons I'm pretty heavily censored tonight. Like, these stories are all very, very sensitive stories that we cover, and we've been doing it for a very long time. And my big flaw is I'm honest, and that's a problem. Nobody else is honest in this industry. So coming out and trying to be sensible, got a great big fat target on my forehead for the rest of my life. Hey, that's the way he rolls. They're cowards. That's the one thing you recognize when you start talking about nuclear and looking at it. You're like, how the hell do you find that many cowards? Holy shit, that's amazing. Yeah, so the trick for me was ice water, like stuffed with ice cubes, and filtered water and water freezing cold, and that'll calm down my throat, because when you're talking straight during these presentations for a couple of hours, it's really difficult, eh? And I struggle sometimes to keep my throat calm enough to go that long. They won't stop until blood flows on the streets. We should drop the atomic bomb. So here's another state TV asking for blood to flow in the streets of France and Germany. This is Ruskies, right? Pro-Russian media. Saying, well, they're in a proxy war, they're shipping weapons to Ukraine, jeopardizing our soldiers. This is a ludicrous debate we're talking about now. Therefore, we should nuke those countries, teach them a lesson so other countries don't do the same thing. That's pretty desperate. And, Americans wanted to bomb China, nuke China, wanted to nuke Vietnam, wanted to nuke North Korea. And they had huge fights and arguments over doing it. They won't stop until they feel fear. So we have two options: successfully complete a special military operation. If for some reason we're not able to do it, then we have to inflict losses on them. If France supplies weapons to killing Ruskies, then blood should flow in the streets of France. And if Germany sends tanks to kill Russian soldiers, blood should flow in the streets of Germany. And pointed out the proxies should be used for these attacks. Well, this is a proxy war. And this is the New World Order ideology, right? To keep the planet in panic and then raise the prices so that people can't afford nutrition and everything else. Burnham councils make calls for Hinckley's response and bid to protect marine life. Again, right, the environmental agencies in the United Kingdom don't want to put up any mitigation to protect the fish, because they'll all be gone soon, right? They're not going to tell that to the population. But because it'll cost a lot more money, and they're already stupidly in the hole, can't pay the bill. Then he says stupid, quite like nuclear, I tell you that. Will new investments in fusion power force a breakthrough? Of course not. First off, you got inbreeds of generational inbreeds that are not motivated to come up with a solution. They're there for a job and a pension, and secure a spot for their inbreeds. They're not there to solve the problem. If they solve the problem, they won't have a job anymore. Because they don't have to do anything. They don't have to prove anything. They just got to show up for work, make a fortune, each one of them. That's what fusion's all about. Fusion's not about cracking the code. There's no. Again, the industry doesn't have anybody that the world says, that's a pretty cool person. And they put Bill Gates and Elon Musk on a pedestal because they don't have a poster child of their own. And in reality, Bill Gates and Elon Musk are not poster childs. They're very, very, very dishonest people. And the world recognizes that. Australia Pacific needs climate action now. So this is a country that is hoping to get money from the Constipated Conference of Parties 27, right, where countries were going to shell out money to poor countries to help them deal with the climate change routine. Like, they probably had this sitting on a shelf for decades, and after Fukushima, they rolled it out. U.S. military post in removes photos of bombs designed to target underground bunkers. So why did he remove it? Well, there was another story came out. The Iranian nuclear facilities are so deep underground that it's beyond the range of U.S. bunker buster bombs. And so they came out with their own story, and then they took it down that caused a controversy, see? New Zealand won't give up its nuclear-free stance, says the new Prime Minister. He said, "I'm pretty clear New Zealanders' are nuclear-free position is long-standing and it's not going to change." Nucor signs a pact with NuScale Power. Whoopie-doo. It's irrelevant. They don't have a reactor. They don't have a design into the regulatory agencies. They don't have a million pieces of paper into the regulatory agencies that will take 5, 6, 7 years to get through. Take another 5 or 6 years to rewrite everything, re-engineer it. It'll take decades. You got to build one. They got to get the kinks out of it. Then you got to build another one. Make sure the kinks are out of it. So you're talking 30, 40, 50 years down the road. Or in the cases of the current media saying, even at the end of the century, small modular reactors won't exist. Which is a great thing to say. If it was going to exist, it would have existed 50 years ago, 80 years ago, so to speak, right? So Nucor is signing a memorandum of understanding with NuScale is worthless. Just another one sucked into the narrative, right? Because they're trying to build hype to get investors, not that they're going to produce a product. It's a great big shell game. Salisbury campaign for nuclear disarmament protest at Laken hailed. Bless her. I love people like that, eh? These little individual groups who says, you know, nuclear is a bunch of scumbags and we're going to shout it loud. I love these people. Every time I see stuff like that, gives me faith in humanity a little bit. What don't give me faith in humanity is stories like this. How a Crumbian, nuclear wasteland, Crumbia, right alongside a Sellafield, it's got a meltdown going there since 57, a mixed oxide fuel meltdown, and surrounded by farms, is shaping the future of nuclear decommissioning. This is their drone, can go into places where humans can't go, because there's a lot of places at Sellafield that humans can't go. So I grabbed a picture, spun it, and tried to wrap my mind around what I was looking at. That's got to be one of the world's ugliest robots I've ever saw. Or drones, I should say. And the problem with it is, once you get into around high-level waste, it's going to fry the electronics on that. They got no shielding at all. It allegedly got arms. It allegedly can attach itself to a wall or any kind of surface, no matter what the angle is. But when you put it in the nuclear environment, where there's gamma shines, and neutron bombardments, and X-rays, and beta rays, that's going to pop, man. They got spots in Sellafield. They got buildings in Sellafield. They got fuel pools in Sellafield. They don't even know what's in it anymore, only that a human can't go near it. There's buildings there you don't walk past, you run past. And that place is surrounded by farms. Danish companies support small modular reactors. For ammonia. Wow, that's fantastic, Dan. That's amazing. Can't wait to see it. Yeah, you'll be waiting there, right? Spain and France clashes over pink hydrogen and planned pipelines. Spain says, look, we're throwing all this energy to France because they can't fix all their corroded and neutron bombarded reactors that are broken down. We can't go wasting our energy on hydrogen. I love hydrogen. We need it, right? Hydrogen can replace gas and diesel and stuff like that. It's real, but calling it so-called pink hydrogen is considered green because you made it from nuclear. It's just a piece of paper, but there's no science to that. It's not green. So calling it green, pretty dishonest. We got a poll. Should we ban stupid nuclear power plants, also known as disease factories, to save the insects, the birds, the animals, the whales, and humanity? And we've done the research expeditions to quantify that assertion. Period. And Spanish energy minister said France should first cover its own domestic energy needs before using its nuclear fleet to produce hydrogen, because they can't keep giving them energy because they're going through their resources that they need. Hydrogen produced from nuclear power, also known as pink hydrogen. Pink. What the hell is that all about, I wonder? Trying to appeal to a certain group. France's energy supply, approximately 70% typically comes from nuclear power, which doesn't anymore, obviously. The winter last year, amid widespread reactor failure, and no water, so they killed all the fish in all the rivers. State-controlled nuclear power joint, which is now officially state, EDF, today, the government announced a full takeover. Announced November 30 of its 56 reactors were operational. It was actually more than that, because we covered it all last year when it was happening. And they don't have them all fixed, and this is going to be a hot summer for France and everybody else. The capacity shortage led Spain to export 9 terawatts of electricity to France last year. We were forced to export at the maximum of our capacity, producing electricity beyond our renewable energy capacities. So France was running on renewables. I love it. And but they can't keep giving it away. They need it for themselves, right? Element creation in the lab deepens understanding of the surface explosion on a neutron star. I love stuff like this. It's a bit of a flaw, actually. It's like I get weak in the knees whenever I read stories about this. I'm like, oh, geez, I love this. I'll sit there and read every single word. And the minute I see stuff like Oak Ridge National Laboratory, which is military, whatever they're up to, it ain't going to be good. This is the military. So this is not going to be used for anybody's good. This is going to be nothing but bad. Kyoto fusioneering secures more funding. I thought the numbers, I believe, increased the fusion companies worldwide. This is a relatively new one in Japan. And they got a lousy $79 million. What the hell are they going to do with $79 million in fusion? They create nothing. It's actually pointless, eh? Again, it's a Ponzi scam. And it's nuclear engineering. If it's from nuclear engineering, you know there's nothing good about it. Medical Press, Medical Express, and he linked it, well, he didn't link it, but I found a study. Attitudes toward possible food radiation contamination following the Fukushima nuclear accident. Possible food contamination. Possible. None of these are experts, by the way. KyotoU University. Over time, reason strengthens, memory fades, and fear subsides, aka people become complacent and eat radioactive food, get sick, and die. The contamination following the Fukushima nuclear plant in 2011 caused widespread fear within Japan and internationally. Unfortunately, the emotional response far outweighed rational decision making. So they're claiming there was no crisis. And the 9-year study led by Kyoto University and the lead author, Takashi Kusumi of Cognitive Psychology in the Graduate School of Education, knows nothing about nuclear. I really disrespect the people that does that. It's so dishonest, because that's how they're making a paycheck by being a unbelievable scumbag to manipulate people into eating radioactive food from a nuclear wasteland so they can get murdered in increments over time. That's how they make their living. Rather go get a real job. That's how they make their living. It's disappointing that people like that actually exist. Attitude towards possible food radiation contamination following the Fukushima accident. I read the whole study. It's disappointing that people like that exist on Earth, and there's a lot of them. And the industry in the nuclear is full of them. It really is like the industry is full of sociopaths and psychopaths. NITI advocates private investments, which is India, National Institution for Transformation, India, advocates private investments for small modular reactors. Nuclear Engineering International. They're a pro-nuclear lobbying group. And so it's really interesting, like we see this a lot, where they talk about private investments. Like if it's such a rock-solid industry, how come the government doesn't have it up and running? How come they don't just give you an open checkbook and get the job done now? The ratepayers are going to pick up the bill later on anyway, right? Well, because it's based on deceit, and what you see is this constant hateful thing in the called media and journalists, and they can't survive in a debate. They can't have a real debate. So if you took the nuclear industry, put them on national TV, it's going to be controlled opposition. If you took the nuclear industry and put them up on TV and had me on the other side of the table, they gave their version, I gave you the real version, that's the end of the nuclear industry that week. That's the end of it. They can't stand up to any scrutiny, not even a little tiny bit. Both of these are the official pictures of Reactor 4. Both of those pictures are the current official pictures of Reactor 4. But one of them can't be real. And you know which one I'm talking about. We raised $150 last night from Cindy. And so I went and bought the welder. I spent the rest of the money out of my pension and bought the welder because the sale's over today. And what I've been doing for the last while is gathering up the tools so I can be independent in case everything falls apart. I can still keep the operation running, right? And I can't afford to spend money all over the place because I have nothing. So the equipment is meant that I can do the work myself, which is humiliating, really, that I got to do all the work myself. I'm already ran into the ground, but it's humiliating that I got to do it. But I'm so grateful that I'm in a position where I almost got everything. Like the only thing, I got a couple of little things to gather up. Nothing else to gather up, really. Just a bunch of little things like a sander, a proper sander, a saw, electric saw, and some stuff for the welders. I don't really need much more. I got pretty well everything gathered up over the last year. Everybody should give themselves a pat on the back because that gives us independence. And I got a big operation. I got a big fleet. I got an absurd amount of equipment, and we can't afford to get anything fixed. We got lots of shit breaking down, and we can keep ahead of it if we have the equipment to fix it. And the last two acquisitions have finally put me in a position to get shit done. Now, I got the tarp off the boat today, believe it or not. What a friggin' mess that was. We've had a windstorm for the last months here. But the last couple of weeks, it blew the shit out, tore the tarp apart. That was a brand new tarp in the fall. Every fall, I have to get a brand new tarp and stick on the equipment, right? The sun beats the shit out of it, and they're the cheap tarps. They usually cost like $100, but a real one's about $350. That won't break down for decades. But we're never, because you took down my main site with 24,200 subscribers when I was there looking for spiders, without even sending me an email. Just took my site down because spiders are missing right from the trees in the forest. And so I was posting from ground zero on the research expeditions. And next thing you know, they took my site down. I haven't been able to recover. We're just barely keeping the operation going. Thank goodness, right? We got a couple of people that are standing tall. But it's such a struggle. So every time I gather up a little bit extra, then I got to get the tools so we got this independence. We can fix everything on our own. And we're almost there. That's pretty impressive. It's so difficult because you got so many things you need to get done. But if you don't have the tools, you're going to be in a lot of trouble because we can't keep doing what we're doing currently, right? So I'm pretty happy about that. Currently, I got the boat batteries on the boat are charging. We want to get the boat in the water when the weather breaks. We still got strong winds down here, and the boat motor is not working properly. But I still got some things that I can look at on my own. But I mean that motor's been to Alaska 6 times, and so that motor should be gone. There should be a brand new motor on the back of that boat. Instead, we got to try to keep it, and it's such a dangerous ocean to play this game on. We're going to do whatever we got to do because the species are dying, and it's due to Fukushima and 80 years of nuclear. But Fukushima was the tipping point. Fukushima was the tipping point. So we're going to close the poll. We got censored like holy shit. 62 views total tonight. And a 2-hour show. I got some serious hate on for Dana. We got 91% of the people understood the question. The question is pretty simple. Anybody who voted no was pro-nuclear. And they don't have you won't see them in the comments section articulating why they voted no. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. We do a shout out tonight. Dana Asana, thank you, Dana. I went with the new welder. It was on sale. This was the last day. And that one was $450. It's a good welder. It'll do what I needed to do. So it's way more advanced than the ones I used to use years ago. So I'm really happy. I still got to pick up a little odds and ends, but that's okay. Richard, good night, everybody. James Lucid, Savannah's Fourth, Angel's Place, Nobby. Good night, everybody. Vast Thinker, Jesse Hoffman, Peaceware, Timothy. No insects in Oregon. Yeah, Oregon's really bad shape, man. They got no salmon either, right? Bubbly Blindy. I know Colette is out there somewhere. Stephen Young. I seen Stephen Young earlier. Hi, Stephen. Ken Zoe. I don't know how the power plant is in Ukraine, Ken. Yeah, I bet it was, Dana. Yeah, good stuff. John Shiflett. John Curtis. Looks like we got everybody. See everybody tomorrow night. Tomorrow night's Thursday night show. Hopefully we get like 17 people tomorrow night and 30 thumbs up. We got 28 thumbs up tonight. I've never seen nothing like it. The last three shows is just probably my best shows is my last three shows, for goodness sakes. We're game on, right? Well, the war has to go on, whether anybody watches the video or not. We still got to go to war every day. Still got to try, because nobody else is. So we got to try. We got no right not to. This is our watch. We're responsible. And we will act accordingly. Have a great night. Have a great day tomorrow. See everybody tomorrow night. Fantastic show ready for tomorrow night. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night. We'll see everybody on the other side. I got no idea why that showed up. Doesn't matter. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. If you make it this far, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Have a great night, great day tomorrow. Take care, folks.